Daniel Carter never imagined that a single meeting could destroy everything he had spent 15 years building. On a rainy Tuesday morning, he walked into the glass headquarters of the company where he had worked since his early 20s. He expected another routine quarterly meeting. Instead, he found dozens of employees sitting silently in a conference room, their faces pale with worry. The CEO, Richard Hale, stood at the front. "We're restructuring," he announced. "Some positions will be eliminated effective immediately." Daniel felt his stomach tighten. A few minutes later, his name appeared on the screen. Just like that, his career was over. No warning. No appreciation. No acknowledgement of the countless weekends he had sacrificed or the late nights he had spent solving crises that kept the company running. A security guard escorted him to his desk while coworkers avoided eye contact. By noon, he was carrying a cardboard box to his car. At home, he tried to stay strong for his 8-year-old daughter, Lily. "How was work?" she asked. Daniel forced a smile. "Different." "Different good or different bad?" He paused. "Different scary." Lily hugged him. "It'll be okay, Dad." He wished he shared her confidence. Over the next few months, Daniel applied everywhere. He sent hundreds of resumes. Some companies never replied. Others rejected him after multiple interviews. Bills piled up. His savings shrank. The mortgage payments became impossible. Eventually, he lost the house. Packing their belongings was one of the hardest things Daniel had ever done. Lily stood in her empty bedroom, staring at the bare walls. "Will we come back someday?" Daniel swallowed hard. "No, sweetheart." That night, after moving into a small apartment, he sat awake staring at the ceiling. For the first time in his life, he felt defeated. Then something unexpected happened. A week later, while driving through an older part of town, Daniel noticed a faded sign hanging above a neglected building. Miller's Bakery. The windows were dusty. The paint was peeling. A handwritten notice in the window read, "For sale." Daniel slowed down. Something about the place caught his attention. He parked and looked inside. The bakery had clearly been closed for years. Broken shelves lined the walls. Old ovens sat covered in dust. Most people saw a building beyond saving. Daniel saw possibility. The owner, an elderly man named Frank Miller, met him later that afternoon. "Not many people ask about this place," Frank said. "I can see why," Daniel replied with a laugh. Frank smiled. "My parents started this bakery 70 years ago. It used to be the busiest spot in town. What happened? Big chains moved in. Customers disappeared. Eventually we closed." Daniel walked through the building again. The bakery looked hopeless. Yet he couldn't stop imagining what it could become. "How much are you asking?" he finally asked. Frank named a number. It was low. Very low. Still, it was nearly everything Daniel had left. For 3 days he wrestled with the decision. Friends thought he was crazy. "You know nothing about baking," one told him. "Exactly," another said. "This is a terrible idea." Maybe they were right. But every time Daniel imagined walking away, he felt regret. Finally, he made the purchase. The moment he signed the papers, panic hit him. What had he done? The building needed repairs. The ovens barely worked. The roof leaked. His bank account was nearly empty. But there was no turning back. Every day after school, Lily came to help. Together they swept floors, scrubbed counters, and painted walls. One evening Daniel found Lily carefully polishing an old display case. "You don't have to do that," he said. "Yes, I do." "Why?" "Because this is our bakery now." Her words made him smile. For the first time in months, he felt hope. The next challenge was learning to bake. Daniel watched videos late into the night. He read books. He practiced endlessly. Most of his early attempts were disasters. Bread came out burned. Cookies were too hard. Cakes collapsed. Lily became his official taste tester. One evening she bit into a muffin and immediately reached for water. Daniel laughed. That bad? She nodded. Really bad. Honesty appreciated. Slowly, things improved. The bread became softer. The pastries became better. The recipes started working. After months of preparation, opening day finally arrived. Daniel barely slept the night before. He expected failure. What if nobody came? What if all this work had been for nothing? At 6 o'clock the next morning, he unlocked the door. The smell of fresh bread filled the street. An hour passed. No customers. Daniel's confidence faded. Then the bell above the door rang. An elderly woman stepped inside. "Good morning," she said. "Good morning," Daniel replied nervously. She bought a loaf of sourdough bread. A few minutes later, another customer arrived. Then another. Then another. By lunchtime, every loaf was gone. Daniel couldn't believe it. Word spread quickly. People loved the bakery's warmth. They loved the fresh ingredients. Most importantly, they loved how welcome they felt. Daniel greeted everyone by name. Lily often helped at the counter after school. Customers adored her. Within a year, Miller's Bakery became one of the most popular businesses in town. Lines stretched out the door every weekend. Local newspapers featured stories about the remarkable comeback. Daniel hired employees. The business expanded. For the first time since losing his job, he felt secure. Then came the morning that changed everything again. The bakery was packed. Customers chatted while enjoying coffee and pastries. Daniel was pulling fresh bread from the oven when the front door opened. A familiar voice spoke. "Good morning." Daniel looked up. His heart stopped. Standing near the entrance was Richard Hale. The CEO who had fired him. The man whose decision had destroyed his career. For a moment neither spoke. Richard looked older. Tired. Less confident. Gone was the expensive suit and commanding presence Daniel remembered. He quietly approached the counter. "I didn't know this place belonged to you," Richard said. Daniel nodded. "It does." The CEO looked around. The bakery buzzed with life. Families laughed. Employees smiled. Customers filled every table. "You built all this?" "Yes." Richard remained silent. Finally he said, "I'll take a loaf of sourdough." Daniel handed him one. As he prepared the order, Richard cleared his throat. "I owe you an apology." Daniel looked up. The bakery suddenly seemed quieter. "I should have treated people differently," Richard continued. "What happened?" Richard sighed. After the layoffs, more talented employees left. Revenue dropped. Investors pulled out. The company collapsed. Daniel was surprised. The once powerful corporation no longer existed. Richard stared at the loaf of bread. "I spent years chasing profits and forgot about people." Neither man spoke for several seconds. Finally Richard asked, "Were you angry?" Daniel considered the question. "For a long time." "And now?" Daniel looked around the bakery. At the employees earning a living. At the customers enjoying themselves. At Lily laughing while helping an elderly customer. Then he smiled. "No." Richard seemed confused. "No? If I hadn't lost that job, I never would have found this life." The former CEO lowered his eyes. Daniel continued. You took away my career. But without meaning to, you gave me a chance to discover who I really was. Richard nodded slowly. For the first time, he seemed genuinely humbled. As he prepared to leave, Lily approached. Have a great day, she said cheerfully. Richard smiled. You too. He walked toward the door carrying his loaf of bread. Before leaving, he turned back one final time. You built something special here. Thank you, Daniel replied. After Richard left, one of the customers who had overheard the conversation stood and began clapping. Then another joined. Soon the entire bakery erupted into applause. Daniel felt emotion rise in his chest. Not because the CEO had apologized. Not because the company had failed. But because he realized how far he had come. The man who once walked out of a corporate office carrying a cardboard box had built something no title could ever provide. A home. A purpose. A future. And as Daniel looked at Lily smiling beside him, he understood something important. Sometimes losing everything isn't the end of the story. Sometimes it's the beginning of the best chapter of your life.